Chapter 5, in which a swamp monster accidentally falls in love. Glurk did not approve, and said so the first day the baby arrived, and he said so again on the next day, and the next, and the next. Shan refused to listen. Babies, 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 sang Firian. He was utterly delighted. The tiny dragon perched on the branch extending over the door of Shan's tree home, opening his multicolored wings as wide as he could and arching his long neck toward the sky. His voice was loud, warbled, and atrociously off-key. Glurk covered his ears. Babies, 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 babies. Ferian continued. Oh, how I love babies! He had never met a baby before, at least not that he could remember, but that did not stop the dragon from loving them all to bits. From morning till night, Firion sang and Shan fussed, and no one, Glurk felt, would listen to reason. By the end of the second week, their entire habitation had been transformed. Second week, diapers and baby clothes and bonnets hung on newly strung clothesline to dry. Freshly blown glass bottles dried on recently constructed rocks next to a brand new washing station. A new goat had been procured, and Shan had separate milk jugs for drinking and cheese making and butter churning, and quite suddenly the floor became thoroughly strewn with toys. By the end of the third week, he had quite enough. Shan, he said, I must insist that you do not fall in love with that baby. The old woman snorted, but she did not answer. Glurk scowled. Indeed, I forbid it. The witch laughed out loud. The baby laughed with her. They were a mutual admiration society of two, and Glurk could not bear it. Luna! Ferian sang, flying in through the open door. No more singing, Glurk snapped. You don't have to listen to him, Ferian dear, Shan said. Singing is good for babies. Everyone knows that. The baby kicked and cawed. Ferian settled on Shan's shoulder and hummed tunelessly, an improvement, to be sure, but not much. I cannot think what any poet might say about babies or witches, but I have no doubt that it is marvelously insightful. She looked around. Glurk, could you please hand me that bottle? Glurk moved closer, leaned his head near the baby, and gave her a skeptical expression. The baby had her fist in her mouth, licking drool through the fingers. She waved her other hand at the monster. Her pink lips spread outward into a wide smile around her wet knuckles. Luna gave a giggly squeal and kicked her tiny feet. Her eyes caught the swamp's master's eyes, and they sparkled like stars. The poet, he said, with emphasis, and narrowed his eyes on the baby, says nothing about witches and babies. Well then, Shan said, touching her nose to the baby's nose and making her laugh. She did it again and again. I suppose we don't have to worry then. Oh no, we don't. Her voice went high and sing-song, and Glurk rolled his tremendous eyes. Don't get too close, Firian dear. Stay behind Auntie Shan. Firian hid behind the crinkly curtain of the old woman's hair, staring at the baby with a combination of fear and jealousy and longing. I want to play with her, he whined. You will, Shan said soothingly as she positioned the baby to take her bottle. I just want to make sure that the two of you don't hurt one another. You're not allergic to the baby, Glurk groaned, just as Firion sneezed and bright plume of fire onto the back of Shan's head. Will the baby grow up to be a giant like you and Shan? He asked. There must be more giants then. In the wider world, I mean. The world past here. How I long to see the world beyond here. Glurk. I want to see all the giants in all the world and all the creatures who are bigger than I. When the time is right, my son, his massive mother had told him in the moments before she plunged herself into the erupting volcano, leaving this world forever. You will know your purpose. You are and will be a giant upon this fair earth. Never forget it. The child will grow as children do, I expect, Glurk said evasively, and when Furian persisted, Glurk pretended to take a nap and in the calla lily bog and keep his eyes closed until he actually slept. Raising a baby, magical or not, is not without its challenges. The inconsolable crying, the near constant runny noses, the obsession with putting very small objects into a drawing mouth, and the noise. Can you please magic her quiet? Firian had begged once the novelty of a baby in the family had worn off. Shan refused, of course. Magic should never be used to influence the will of another person, Firian. Shan told him over and over. How could I do the thing that I must instruct her to never do? Once she knows how to understand, that's hypocrisy, is what. Even when Luna was content, she still was not quiet. She hummed, she gurgled, she babbled, she screeched, she guffawed, she snorted, she yelled. She was a waterfall of sound, pouring, 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 and she never stopped. She even babbled in her sleep. Glurk made a sling for Luna that hung from all four of his shoulders as she walked on all sixes. He took to pacing with the baby from the swamp, past the workshop, past the castle ruin, and back again, reciting poetry as he did. So, he did not intend to love the baby, and yet, from grain of sand, recited the monster. Birth's light, birth's space, birth's infinite time, and to grain of sand do all things in return. In that first year, both Shan and Glurk watched the baby for any sign of magical eruption, though they could both see the oceans of magic thrumming just under the child's skin. It remained inside her, a surging, unbroken wave. At night, moonlight and starlight bent toward the baby, flooding her cradle. Shan covered the windows with heavy curtains, but she would find them thrown open, and the child drinking moonlight in her sleep. Poetry will help, Glurk said. The study of language ennobles the rowdiest beast. Science will organize the brain of hers, Shan said. How can a child be naughty when she is studying the stars? I shall teach her math, Farian said. She will not be able to play a trick on me if she is too busy counting to 1,000,000. And so Luna's education began. In every breeze exhales the promise of spring, Glurk whispered as Luna napped during the winter. Each sleeping tree dreams green dreams. The barren mountain wakes in blossom. Wave after wave of magic surged silently under her skin. They did not crash to the shore. Not yet. Chapter 6, in which Antane gets himself in trouble. During Antane's first 5 years as an elder in training, he did his best to convince himself that his job would one day get easily. He was wrong. It didn't. The elders barked orders at him during council meetings and community functions and after-hours discussions. They berated him when they ran into him on the street, or when they sat in his mother's dining room for yet another sumptuous supper. They admonished him when he followed in their wake during surprise inspections, and Taine hung in the background, his eyebrows knit together into a perplexed knot. It seemed that no matter what Antaine did, the elders erupted into purple-faced rage and sputtering incoherence. Antaine, and the elders barked, "Stand up straight! Antaine, what have you done with the proclamations? Antaine, wipe that ridiculous look off your face! Antaine, how could you have forgotten the snocks? Antaine, what on earth have you spilled all over your robes?" Antaine, it seemed, could not do anything right. His home life wasn't any better. How could you possibly still be in an elder's training? His mother fumed night after night at supper. Sometimes she'd let her spoon come crashing down to the table, making the servants jump. "My brother promised me that you would be an elder by now. He promised. Your uncle can boil his head," she fumed. "We deserve that honor. I mean, you deserve it, my dear son." Antaine wasn't so sure. The next morning, Antaine donned his freshly laundered robe and headed into the council hall well before dawn. Every day, his first task of the morning was to read through the citizen complaints and requests that had been scrawled with the bits of chalk on the large slate wall, and deem which ones were worth attention and which should simply be washed down and erased. Next, Antaine was to air out of the room, then post the day's agendas, then fluff the cushions for the elders' bony bottoms, then spray the entrance room with some kind of perfume concocted in the laboratories of the Sisters of the Star, designed apparently to make people feel wobbly-kneed and tongue-tied and frightened and grateful all at once. And then he was to stand in the room as the servants arrived, giving each an imperious expression as they entered the building, before hanging up his robes in the closet and going to school. As usual, he was the first one to arrive at school. Even the teacher wasn't there. He sat in the stoop and took out his journal. He was done with his school work, not that it mattered. His teacher insisted on calling him Elder Antaine in a breathy, fawning voice, even though he wasn't an elder yet, and gave him top marks no matter what kind of work he did. He could likely turn in blank pages and still get top marks. Antaine still worked hard in spite of that. His teacher, he knew, was just hoping for special treatment later. In his journal, he had several sketches of a project of his own design, a clever cabinet to house, and neatly organized garden tools situated on wheels so that it could be pulled easily by a small goat, a gift intended for the head gardener, who was always kind. A shadow fell across his work. "Nephew," the grand elder said. Antaine's head went up like a shot. "Uncle," he said, scrambling to his feet, accidentally dropping his papers, scattering them across the ground. He hurriedly gathered them back up into his arms. Grand Elder Gurland rose his eyes. "Come, nephew," the Grand Elder said, with a swish of his robes, motioning for the boy to follow him. "You and I must talk." "But what about school?" "There is no need to be in school in the first place. The purpose of this structure is to house and amuse those who have no futures until they are old enough to work for the benefit of the protectorate. People of your stature have tutors, and why you have refused such a basic thing is beyond comprehension. Your mother prattles on about it endlessly. In any case, you will not be missed. This was true. He would not be missed. Every day in class, Antane sat in the back and worked quietly. He rarely asked questions. He rarely spoke, especially now, since the one person whom he wouldn't have minded speaking to, and even better, if she spoke back to him in return, had left school entirely. She had joined the novitiate of the Sisters of the Star. Her name was Ethne, and though Antane had never exchanged 3 words in succession with her, still he missed her desperately, and now only went to school day after day on the wild hope that she would change her mind and come back. Antane found himself relaxing, but only for a moment. With a broad sweep of robes, the Grand Elder rose to his feet. "But," he said, his voice reverberating strangely in the small room, "my affection for you only goes so far." There was in his voice a brittle edge. His eyes were wide, strained, even a bit wet. "Is my uncle worried about me?" Antane wondered. Surely not, he thought. "Young man," his uncle continued, "this cannot go on. The other elders are muttering. He paused. His voice caught in his throat. His cheeks were flushed. "They aren't happy. My protection over you extends far, my dear." Dear boy, but it is not infinite. 5 days later, as the robes swept through the town toward the cursed house, Antane was home, sick to his stomach, vomiting his lunch, or so he said. The other elders grumbled during the entire procession. They grumbled as they retrieved the child from its pliant parents. They grumbled as they hurried toward the sycamore grove. "The boy will have to be dealt with," the elders muttered, and each one knew exactly what that meant. "Oh, Antane, my boy, my boy! Oh, Antane, my boy!" Gerland thought as they walked, tendrils of worrying curling around his heart, cinching into a hard, tight knot. "What have you done, you foolish child? What have you done?"